Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm happy to have back with me on this show Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Daniel's had quite a great background. I would encourage you to read his bio, but he's been involved with a lot of international institutions that have been really concerned about human rights and the kind of things that America was supposed to be all about. Our founding fathers risked their lives and put a country together in 1776, and unfortunately much of what they really put together is being ignored, and that's of course one of the things that we talk about, Ron Paul talks about. The Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity is all about, is much about human rights, about the natural rights of man, the rights that we have to be free, and so what we talk about on this show, and why we really like to have Daniel with us from time to time, is to talk about what America is doing overseas and how we are actually contradicting the very values that our founding fathers blessed us with, and unfortunately we seem to be throwing them out the door. So welcome, Daniel. It's really good to have you back with me again.
Thanks so much, Jay. It's great to talk to you.
It's always good to talk to you, and it's always good to go to the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity website, because there's always so many articles there that really can help us understand what's really going on internationally, as opposed to the propaganda we're given day in and day out in the mainstream media. But Daniel, one of the things that I know is really important on the world scene these days is the issue of Syria and Iran. And, what's going on there? First of all, one of the things I can't quite understand about Iran is, why do we see it as such a threat? I read on an article on the website, Iran is receiving $7 billion out of $100 billion from frozen assets. It's their own money. Their economy is in shambles. They're isolated from the rest of the world. The nuclear-armed U.S. has military bases completely circling the country, and Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, the last time Iran invaded another country was over 200 years ago. The U.S. is lucky if it can go 2 years without bombing or overthrowing somebody, and yet the neocons propagandize Iran as a threat to take over the world. Daniel, what's going on here? Why are we so afraid of Iran when we have them surrounded with nuclear weapons, when Israel is sitting there with nuclear weapons aimed at whoever it chooses to aim it at? Why are we so paranoid about Iran? What's going on here?
It's funny. What you were saying reminds me of a cartoon I saw recently. It's a map, and it shows Iran, and it shows all of the U.S. bases surrounding it. And the caption was something like, "See, you know that Iran is a threat. Look how close they put their country to our military bases."
Yeah, right. So we can laugh about it, but I mean, people are dying because of this nonsense. What is going on here?
And yeah, they may continue to die because of this nonsense, and it may increase. But I think the administration has put itself in a real bind with Iran. It's to its credit, it has opened negotiations. The 6-month agreement will go into effect this month. We've heard it'll begin this month. But the sort of neocons are fighting back. Congress, the Senate, the Menendez-Kirk bill will increase sanctions on Iran, and what it will also do is increase sanctions on third-party countries that do business with Iran. So basically, what the letter of the law says, and of course it'll never be followed, is that if China thumbs its nose at these international sanctions, which it is already doing along with Russia, is beginning to do, if they do that, then the U.S. will forbid trade with China and Russia.
Huh.
So let's see that happen and see what happens to the U.S. economy. So these people are so ideological. They're so obsessed with defeating Iran, with coming out on top, with ruling the region and ruling the world, that they'll put the U.S. economy directly into the toilet, and they'll put millions of lives at risk in Iran, in Syria, in Israel, and elsewhere. But the administration is in a bind because, Russia, I don't know if you noticed this, but Russia recently, I think just a couple of days ago, have inked a huge oil for goods swap with Iran. That would be worth $1.5 billion a month. And what that would do, in effect, would be completely obliterate the U.S. sanctions regime against Iran. The question is timing. There's a possibility that they will they have not finalized and inked it. They'll put it into effect as soon as the permanent agreement, if one does occur between the West and Iran, takes place. But if the U.S. and the neocons in Congress scuttle that agreement, they're ready to do it anyway, and it's a big economic, financial boom for the two countries involved. And once again, for ideological reason, Americans and American business will be left out in the cold. So thanks a lot, guys.
So what this means is that Iran would trade oil for goods from Russia? Russia would export goods to Iran? Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay, since Iran is being sealed off from trading with the rest of the world, Russia is there to try to provide those goods to Iran in exchange for oil. Russia has its own oil, of course. It would then export it out or use it.
Sure, through its pipeline network of pipelines and make a profit on it. And they're saying somewhere upwards of 500,000 barrels a day of Iranian oil in exchange for, things that the sanctions have really put a grip on for Iran. Think about industrial equipment, spare parts, and all of these things that you really need to make your economy work. They've been deprived of many of these things. So they will be supplied some of these things that are quite necessary. And China will follow suit, no doubt, if this goes through. So on the one hand, the president apparently is trying to continue negotiating, although there have been some stops and starts. The neocons are fighting back with legislation that will increase sanctions, and especially third-party sanctions. But the rest of the world is saying we've had enough of the sanctions. The sanctions aren't going to work. So what's the U.S. going to do? The chance of the U.S. going to war with Iran now, I think, is very, very minuscule. It would destroy. There would be no pretext, unless, of course, the propaganda machine cooks up some kind of horrible pretext. You can't go to war over some non-proliferation agreement. So they're in a bind right now, and it remains to be seen what will happen.
You mean the Obama administration is in a bind right now? It's sort of caught between.
It's a huge bind. It's talked itself into a corner.
Yeah,
they really have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess there could be some attack on Israel or something that might prompt a military action.
Some sort of false front. I mean, those are false flag, I should say, attack, and those things do happen. And let's just hope and pray that doesn't happen. But when desperate people get even more desperate, they do desperate things, don't they?
But I still don't understand, because it would end up hurting American interest in terms of economic interest, you're suggesting, more than it would help.
Sure, and it continues to hurt American economic interests, and it really hurts the private sector in Iran, and it bolsters the state sector. So it bolsters socialism in Iran and destroys the small businessman. This is a power struggle in the Middle East between the Shia and Sunni and Israel. It's a tripartite power struggle that manifests itself in Syria, manifests itself in Iran, and elsewhere, Bahrain, and even in Saudi Arabia itself. And stupidly, the interventionists in Washington they don't see a conflict that they can let pass by. They've got to be dragged by their nose into the middle of these conflicts that have nothing to do with the U.S.
But you're seeing it in terms of the overall interest of the country, and I have to think there must be some very self-centered economic interests, corporate interests, military-industrial complex interests that are willing to just close their mind to any kind of peaceful negotiations and want to just continue war, no matter for whatever reason they can concoct.
Yeah, there's inertia, there's ideology, there's the view that we have to be the hyperpower. You're right, but there are special interests, you're right, that have a big stake in it.
Daniel, another thing you talked to me about yesterday as we were speaking, there's something called the Geneva II conference. First of all, what is the Geneva conference? Was there a Geneva I conference, and if so, what was its purpose?
Yeah, that was the so-called Friends of Syria. I think they're more appropriately titled the Fiends of Syria. These are the Western and Gulf Arab countries who pretend to have Syria's interests at heart. And there was a Geneva Conference I that happened not long ago that came to an uncertain conclusion. It released a statement that didn't mean very much. The idea is they would try to restart the negotiations between the government and the opposition in Syria. Well, the Fiends of Syria, the Friends of Syria, met again in Paris. The Geneva II conference is supposed to start in 10 days' time. Mm-hmm. And the idea is to bring together the current Syrian government led by Assad and the opposition fighting against Assad to look for a political solution to the problem. But of course, the whole thing is cooked up from the beginning. The Friends of Syria met in Paris this weekend, and they said, well, any agreement that would happen would have to start from a regime change in Syria. So what's the point of negotiation if they come in with that position? Mm-hmm. What government in the world would agree to go sit down to a negotiation where the beginning of it is that you have to give up power? Mm. But the other thing that's funny about it is the U.S. and its Friends of Syria, they have absolutely no control over the group that they're sponsored, the Syrian National Coalition. The Syrian National Coalition has no support on the ground. They're almost unknown in Syria, but this is the great partner of the Friends of Syria. Mm. They bring absolutely nothing to the table except the desire to be installed into power by the Friends of Syria. the U.S. and its allies. So on the opposition side, there really is no there there.
Interesting.
It's a charade.
Interesting. So if they don't have any support in Syria, then no wonder the neocons are not making any progress here. I guess you're talking about Saudi Arabia being primarily the major friend of Syria.
Well, they're certainly the funder. Well, they're the funders of everything. They've sunk billions of dollars into this project. Mm-hmm. They're funding the Islamic Front, which is also an Islamist extremist organization that's fighting the al-Nusra Front. Both of them agree almost identically on the ideas of setting up a radical Islamic state in Syria, bankrolled by the Saudis. And the Saudis are also bankrolling this very silly Syrian National Coalition, which doesn't control any fighting force on the ground in Syria. Not even the Free Syrian Army, the supposed moderates. They have no control over them either.
So in this Geneva II thing, I mean, is Russia invited, China invited to this discussion?
Russia's a participant, and they're trying to, I hate to say it this way, but they are trying to be the adults in the room. The Russian Foreign Secretary Lavrov was meeting with John Kerry this weekend, and they were discussing some confidence-building measures between the sides in Syria that might spark the beginning of a resolution to the conflict. Some of those are, some safe areas, some relief for humanitarian corridors to provide food and medicine to people that have been stuck in the fighting and that sort of thing. So that's to start, building some confidence. But the reality is the Syrian government has all the momentum on the ground. They are winning the war. They have very little incentive to go to a conference that says, okay, well, you guys are winning, but you have to be overthrown anyway, because we respect democratic values and we want democracy to succeed in Syria. Of course, look everywhere else in the region where these guys have supported democracy.
Yeah.
Look in Egypt, look in Gaza. Democracy's great unless the wrong guys win. And the reality is, and I saw this just the other day, that if a truly free and fair election were held in Syria right now, it's very, very likely that Assad would win again.
Interesting.
So they like democracy, but not that much.
Yeah, well, as Hillary Clinton says, our kind of democracy, meaning... Yeah, a democracy that is not really a democracy because we don't let the people decide. We're going to tell you what's best for you and what kind of government you should have. It seems to me, Daniel, what we do, going way back to the Reagan administration even, is that we support these very radical Muslim groups in this power quest. I mean, we did it against the Soviets back at that time, and it seems like nothing has really changed.
And that was the kernel of al-Qaeda, the support for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan that created bin Laden. And so who knows how many bin Ladens might be created right now in the Middle East, and how many of those have come from the U.S. and from Germany and the U.K., have gone there to fight radical jihad, and when it's done, they'll go home, and who knows what kind of havoc they'll wreak on their home countries. This is blowback writ large.
It just seems to me just total insanity, and I just can't make any sense of it, why this sort of thing is happening. I just don't understand. It doesn't make any sense, and yet it just seems to go on and on and on. What's driving this other than what Eisenhower warned about, the military-industrial complex, the enormous amount of money that's involved in terms of making killing machines, I guess. It's just it makes no sense at all. So what do you think will come of this? Will Russia walk out? I mean, it doesn't seem as though there's much of a chance of the Friends of Syria prevailing here, is there?
I think the conference will fizzle if it takes place at all. Right now, the Syrian opposition says it will not attend the conference. And if it does, which group will attend? Will it be the people who have a fondness for cutting out people's hearts and eating them? Or just the other day, one of the radical groups just lined up a bunch of prisoners and shot them in the head. They've attacked citizens and Latakia, they killed hundreds of minorities. So which opposition group will show up, if any? But I think the whole thing will fizzle. They'll probably issue a face-saving statement, and not much will come out of it because the reality on the ground is different.
Yeah, well, these are the people that we support, huh? These are the people that are doing this, cutting the hearts out and eating them and shooting people in the head without any kind of a trial or any. It's just nonsense. I don't get it. It's difficult for me to comprehend. Well, it seems to me, I just reminded, as you were talking there, about this young lady that was visiting President Obama, and she told him exactly that about blowback. When you're doing this stuff overseas, what you're doing is creating more al-Qaedas, more terrorists, not less. So this is what Ron Paul talked about, of course, during the campaign. It seems to
Sure.
be nothing new under the sun, as it says in the good book. Lots more to talk to you about. I guess we're basically out of time here, Daniel, but I tell our listeners there's an excellent video of you. You appeared at the on Russian television along with another guest from Israel, perhaps, to talk about what's going on with al-Qaeda. What is al-Qaeda? Who supports it? Who benefits from it? Maybe just in a quick minute, maybe you covered those topics, but if you'd like to just make a comment or two about that video or the content of that discussion.
Well, sure, and it was also reflected on another piece that we had on the site by Eric Margulies, who's as you know, is a very talented international writer, who says Al-Qaeda seems to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. How is this possible?
Mm-hmm. Well, and who supports it? I guess in part that's part of what we're doing.
Well, we fight it in Iraq, but we support it in Syria.
Right.
The same group, the ISIS, we fight in Iraq, but support in Syria.
The guys that supposedly sent airplanes into our buildings in New York City, we are now supporting in different places around the world. The very guys we supported against the Soviet Union back in the Reagan years, we're supporting still. It's just nonsense as far as I'm concerned. And who benefits from it? Well, I believe it's a military-industrial complex. It's selling weapons and killing people, making money with all of that. To me, that's the only sense I can make out of this whole thing.
And the ideologues on the left and the right.
Yeah, I guess the PhDs from Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, and Oxford and Cambridge, or wherever they come from, they get paid lots of money by the Council of Foreign Relations and other places, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. Sure, the think tanks and the Samantha Powers of the world who believe we have a responsibility to protect everyone in the world before military gets called on all these missions that they can't complete.
We protect everybody in the world by shooting them in the heads and cutting their hearts out. And Daniel, it's nonsense. That's why people need to go to the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. We're out of time. Daniel, thank you very much for joining me again. Look forward to talking to you again, perhaps next week, about some more topics in the news geopolitically. Thank you very much for being with me.
Thanks, Jay.